Hemlock. The fleet from the North Pole was oh so beautiful. There were peppermint crests. The paddles were wrapped in dental floss. As the elves approached the blue beach, their ships were seen as most peculiar by the trees, who observed the approach of small tribes. The ships held walking sticks and mints in watering cans. That they did. Meanwhile, the sugar mountain in the middle of the Greek island did have a beauteous ruby at the peak, according to a legend. The elves were determined to climb the mountain and retrieve the ruby so Santa could donate it to a charity. They got off their boats and waded in the shallow as they pulled the ships toward the strand of sand. And on the strand of sand, the elves started to look into their rucksacks for appetizing sugar plums they could have for lunch. They started a fire and picnicked under the stars in the moon's watch. 4 elves started to talk as they digested their plums. "Do you miss your wife?" "Oh, I do." "I miss my wife." "I don't miss my wife. She is crazy." "You are crazy too." "I must be crazy to be using these ships." "Say, why do we put dental floss around our paddles?" "So that the sharks would start to floss instead of chomping up our hours." The elf who had insulted his distant wife was watering the ground with a watering can, and he started to whistle. Doot-dee-doo. Another elf lay back under the stars. "Do you remember how we got on these ships?" "I don't." "I do," said the crazy one. "It all started when we stopped sleeping on our backs. We started sleeping on our sides, and that's when the narwhals began to mess with our dreaming. Then there came the day that someone left a caramel peppermint on the ground by the pole. A British explorer." "The one who built the ice school?" "Yes, the one who built the ice school and taught us to sail, and thought it would be a wise idea for us to be practical and build these ships while we learned about the language." "Do you think we will make it back to our cabins before the first blizzard next year?" "I can't be sure. I want to experience it with my son." Then one of the elves, while looking up at the sky, saw an oval. The oval sank down over it, and in the oval the elf saw the city of Worcester, Massachusetts. With the several high buildings downtown, the fancy people walking around, the leisure in the common, the city looked like a future utopia. And there was a message. "If you want to join the city's community, raise your hand and pledge allegiance." The 4 went to sleep. They had their own community by the North Pole, but supported Worcester's beauty. There were 47 elves in total who snoozed under the starry sky, and ovals came down from the sky and offered them portals to Grafton and Auburndale. When they woke up, there was a ship of skeletons offshore. They were also after the ruby, but the skeletons were less experienced sailors. The bones watched from the blue beach as the elves ran toward the mountains and did not pursue, because nearby there was another mountain that also had a ruby. So there was another senseless battle avoided. All this was happening in the year 2111, by the way. In a couple hours, the elf tribes, carrying mints, watering cans, and walking sticks, got to the middle of the mountain. They camped there and looked up at the stars around fires. The 4 elves got to talking again. "Man, I sure miss my wife and tots. I'm awful curious to find out if this charitable ruby will be in a fortified glass case from some past guardian, or if it will be in dirt for us to comb. I hope it's in a case, but that might be wishful thinking." Then there came an anthropologist named Claude Levi Strauss, who had been walking around the island and saw all the elves by their fires and tents, who he said had only been pretending to be on this world adventure. He spoke to them about their imaginary travels and found them to be further interesting activities of what he called the savage mind. Then Marion Stamp Dawkins, a biologist, appeared. She had a nice chat with Strauss about animal rights, citing her essay, Animal Suffering, the Science of Animal Warfare. Welfare. It's welfare. The elves escaped death by disbelief the next morning. Despite Strauss, they kept working up the mountain to get Santa the ruby. They noticed bushels of hemlock, a plant in the carrot family. Then Socrates appeared and started asking questions. "Don't eat that. It's poisonous," he mentioned. The elves are still on the mission, but Santa waits at home. Santa is beautifully patient. This is part of why the elves love him. They also like his beard.